She was found hanging in a cruise ship cabin. But police said the story did not fit. On January 10, 2010, the MSC Musica was returning to Santos after a 7-night voyage along the Brazilian coast. For the passengers, it was supposed to be the end of a normal cruise. The ship was coming back to port. Luggage was being packed. Corridors were waking up. People were preparing to step off the vessel and return to ordinary life. But somewhere behind the passenger decks, in the hidden part of the ship most guests never see, a 28-year-old Brazilian crew member named Camilla Peixoto Bandeira was dead inside a crew cabin. The first explanation was simple. Her fiancé, fellow crew member Bruno Souza Baicalho, reportedly said he found her hanging from a bedsheet. A tragic suicide inside a small room at sea. A private death on a ship full of people. But when Brazilian federal police began looking closer, that explanation started to fall apart. According to later reporting, the physical evidence and witness statements did not support the suicide story. Investigators treated Camilla's death as a homicide, and Bruno was formally accused. Then the case became even stranger. In 2013, a preventive arrest order was reportedly issued after Bruno could not be located at the addresses given to the court. There was also mention of communication with Interpol. And after that, the public trail starts to fade. No verified conviction. No verified acquittal. No clear final judgment. Just a cruise ship cabin, a bedsheet, a rejected suicide story, and a young woman whose death still sits in the dark space between evidence and silence. This is the story of Camilla Peixoto Bandeira, the crew member found dead aboard the MSC Musica, and the cabin mystery that never fully came back to shore. Before the cabin became the center of a homicide investigation, Camilla Peixoto Bandeira was part of a world most cruise passengers never really see. She was not one of the tourists walking the bright decks of the MSC Musica, taking photos, eating in restaurants, waiting for the next port, or watching the Brazilian coast pass by from a passenger area. Camilla was crew. And that changes everything. For passengers, a cruise ship is built to feel effortless. The rooms are cleaned. The meals appear. The lights stay on. The ship moves from one place to another as if the whole thing is automatic. People see uniforms, smiles, music, elevators, pools, and polished floors. But underneath that polished world is another ship. A working ship. A hidden ship. A place of crew corridors, service doors, shared spaces, small cabins, long shifts, and lives lived behind the scenes. While passengers are sleeping, crew members are still working. While guests are enjoying the sea, somebody is cleaning, cooking, serving, carrying, repairing, organizing, or preparing the vessel for the next day. Camilla belonged to that hidden side of the MSC Musica. The reliable public information about her is limited, and that matters. Her story should not be filled with invented details just to make it more dramatic. What can be said responsibly is that Camilla Peixoto Bandeira was a 28-year-old Brazilian woman, working as a crew member aboard the MSC Musica. She was also reported to be in a romantic relationship or engagement with another crew member, Bruno Souza Baicalho. Those are simple facts. But they are enough to understand the emotional weight of the case. Camilla was young. She was far from the kind of ordinary workplace most people understand. She was living and working at sea, inside a closed environment where your colleagues can also become your friends, your neighbors, your witnesses, and sometimes the only people who know what is happening behind a cabin door. Cruise crew life can be intense in a way outsiders do not always imagine. The ship is not just a workplace. It is also home. You do not clock out and drive away. You do not go back to your own apartment at the end of the day. The same vessel that gives passengers a vacation also holds the private lives of the people working beneath that vacation. Relationships can form there. Arguments can happen there. Secrets can stay there. And when something goes wrong inside that hidden world, the passengers above may never know anything happened. That is what makes Camilla's case so unsettling. Her death did not happen in a visible passenger space. It was not a public fall, a deck incident, or a disappearance over the railing. The incident was reported inside the crew accommodation area, away from the bright surface of the ship. At the time, the MSC Musica was operating a 7-night voyage along the Brazilian coast. The ship was returning to Santos when Camilla was found dead. That detail gives the story a strange contrast. For passengers, the cruise was almost over. Suitcases would be packed. People would be thinking about disembarkation, travel home, photos, memories, and the return to normal life. But for Camilla, there would be no return. The public record does not reliably tell us her exact on-board job, her hometown, her family background, how long she had worked for MSC, or how long her relationship with Bruno had lasted. So the story has to stay close to what is known. Camilla was a young Brazilian crew member. She lived inside the private working world of a cruise ship. She was romantically linked to another crew member. And on the morning the MSC Musica was coming back to Santos, she was found dead in a cabin. At first, the explanation was suicide. But soon, investigators would begin asking whether the story they were given actually matched the evidence. To understand Camilla Peixoto Bandeira's case, you have to understand the ship. The MSC Musica was not a small boat where every sound, every movement, and every person could be easily noticed. It was a massive cruise ship, the kind of vessel built to feel like a floating hotel for passengers, but also a floating workplace for the crew living behind the scenes. The ship entered service in 2006 as part of MSC's Musica class line. Modern specifications describe it as around 294 meters long, more than 92,000 gross tons, with capacity for nearly 1,000 crew members. That scale matters, because when people imagine a cruise ship, they usually imagine the visible world. They imagine restaurants, pools, music, bright lights, balconies, shore excursions, and passengers walking through polished corridors with drinks in their hands. They imagine a vacation machine, carefully designed so that nothing feels difficult and nothing feels dangerous. But that is only one side of the ship. Underneath that passenger world is another world completely. Crew areas, service corridors, restricted doors, small cabins, workstations, long shifts, private relationships, arguments no passenger hears, friendships no passenger sees, and lives happening quietly beneath the surface of someone else's holiday. Camilla belonged to that hidden world. She was a Brazilian crew member aboard the MSC Musica. She was 28 years old, and public reporting connected her romantically with another crew member, Bruno Souza Bicalho. That relationship would become central to the case, because Bruno was reportedly the person who found or reported her body, and he would later become the formally accused person in the homicide investigation. But at the beginning, before police theories, before court orders, before the case disappeared into legal uncertainty, they were both part of the same closed ship environment. And a cruise ship crew environment can be intense. On land, if a relationship becomes tense, people can leave. They can go to separate homes. They can avoid each other. They can bring distance into the situation. At sea, distance is harder. You live where you work. You work near the people you know. You sleep in a small cabin. Your private life exists inside a vessel that never stops moving. That does not mean every shipboard relationship is dangerous. Most are not. But it does mean that when something does go wrong, the setting can make everything more claustrophobic. There is nowhere fully separate from the ship. And in Camilla's case, the incident did not happen in a public passenger area. It reportedly happened inside the crew accommodation area, away from the bright surface of the cruise. That changes the whole feeling of the story. This was not a woman vanishing over a railing while passengers watched the ocean. This was not a body found on a public deck. This was not a dramatic scene in front of hundreds of witnesses. It was a death inside the hidden side of a ship. A cabin. A bedsheet. A fiancé's explanation. And later, police doubt. At the time, the MSC Musica was operating along the Brazilian coast during the South American summer season. Available reporting says it was completing a 7-night voyage and returning to Santos on January 10, 2010, when Camilla was found dead. For passengers, that date probably meant the cruise was ending. For crew, it meant another turnaround, another port, another cycle of work. But for Camilla, it became the final morning of her life. According to the available case file, the initial explanation was suicide by hanging. Bruno reportedly said he found Camilla hanging by a bedsheet, with secondary accounts describing the sheet as attached to some kind of refrigeration or air conditioning pipe or tube inside the cabin. At first, that sounds like a complete story. A young woman is found hanging. Her partner reports it. The ship notifies authorities. The company expresses regret and waits for the official conclusion. But the problem was that investigators reportedly did not believe the story matched what they found. Brazilian federal police did not accept the suicide explanation. Reports said the forensic findings and witness statements were inconsistent with the hanging account, and the case was pursued as homicide. This is where the case becomes dangerous to tell carelessly, because public information is limited. The available record does not give the exact cabin number. It does not confirm whether the door was locked. It does not provide the full autopsy report, the full witness statements, the complete contradiction list, CCTV details, or a verified final judgment. So the story cannot be built with fake certainty. We cannot say there was a loud argument unless a source proves it. We cannot say Bruno fled the ship immediately unless the record proves it. We cannot say the captain saw something specific unless the original statement is available. We cannot say the exact murder method because the public file does not establish it. What we can say is this. Camilla was found dead inside the crew world of the MSC Musica. The first explanation was hanging suicide. Federal police reportedly rejected that explanation. Bruno was formally accused of homicide. And years later, a preventive arrest order was reportedly issued after he could not be found at the addresses provided to the court. That is what makes the background so haunting. The ship was huge, bright, and full of people. But the truth seems to have narrowed down to one hidden cabin, one rejected story, and one case file that never fully surfaced into public view. The final hours of Camilla Peixoto Bandeira are difficult to reconstruct, because the public record does not give us the full timeline. There is no complete minute-by-minute account. No confirmed last conversation. No verified cabin number. No clear public record showing who saw her last, what time she entered the cabin, whether the door was locked, or what was happening inside the crew quarters before her body was found. And that absence is part of what makes this case so unsettling. What we do know is this. On Sunday, January 10, 2010, the MSC Musica was returning to Santos after a 7-night cruise along the Brazilian coast. For passengers, it should have been the final stretch of the voyage, the kind of morning where people start thinking about luggage, disembarkation, travel plans, and going home. But somewhere inside the crew accommodation area, Camilla was found dead. She was 28 years old. She was Brazilian. She worked aboard the ship. And according to the available reconstruction, her fiancé or boyfriend, fellow crew member Bruno Souza Baicalho, reportedly found or reported her body and informed ship authorities. The first explanation was suicide. Bruno reportedly told investigators that he had found Camilla hanging by a bedsheet inside the cabin. Some secondary accounts described the sheet as attached to a refrigeration or air conditioning pipe or tube. At first, that version may have sounded like a tragic but simple explanation. A young crew member. A private cabin. A bedsheet. A death just as the ship was coming back to port. But the problem with a simple explanation is that it still has to match the evidence. A hanging scene depends on details. The height of the attachment point. The position of the body. The strength of the sheet. The direction of the marks. The condition of the cabin. The timing of death. The witness statements. The medical findings. And in this case, the public material does not give us those details fully. The available file specifically warns that public sources do not confirm the exact cabin number, deck, body position, knot, locked door status, or who removed the body. So the timeline has to stay honest. We cannot say exactly what happened in Camilla's cabin before she died. We cannot say there was an argument. We cannot say someone heard screaming. We cannot say there was CCTV footage. We cannot say who entered or left the room at a specific time. Those details may exist in police or court files, but they are not visible in the public record. What we can say is that the first story did not survive the investigation. Brazilian federal police reportedly did not accept the suicide explanation. Reports said the forensic examination identified mechanical asphyxia, but investigators believed the scene and statements were inconsistent with the hanging account. That is the turning point. Because mechanical asphyxia, by itself, does not automatically prove murder. It is a broad forensic category where breathing or oxygen flow is restricted by an external mechanism. It can include hanging, but it can also involve other forms of neck compression. The stronger point is that authorities reportedly believed the claimed hanging scene did not fit. That means Camilla's final hours became something more than a private tragedy. They became a question. What really happened inside that cabin? When did it happen? Who was with her? What did Bruno see? What did the other witnesses say? And why did investigators decide the suicide story was not enough? The public record does not answer all of that. It leaves us with a ship returning to Santos, a young crew member found dead in a cabin, a fiancé's reported explanation, and a police investigation that moved the case toward homicide. That is why the timeline feels so cold. The cruise was almost over. The ship was almost home. Passengers were about to leave. But beneath the bright passenger decks, in the hidden crew world of the MSC Musica, Camilla's final hours had already become a mystery. The discovery of Camilla Peixoto Bandeira's body did not happen in the bright, public world of the cruise ship. Not on the pool deck. Not in a restaurant. Not near a railing where passengers could look out at the Brazilian coast. It happened in the hidden side of the MSC Musica. Inside the crew accommodation area. Inside a cabin. That detail changes the entire feeling of the case. Cruise ships are built to separate two worlds. Passengers see the polished version, clean corridors, music, meals, ocean views, entertainment, and the feeling of safety. But beneath that surface is the crew world, where the people who keep the ship running live their private lives in smaller, quieter spaces most guests never enter. That was where Camilla was found. According to the available reconstruction, on Sunday morning, January 10, 2010, the MSC Musica was returning to Santos after a 7-night voyage along the Brazilian coast. Camilla, a 28-year-old Brazilian crew member, was found unresponsive or dead in her cabin. Her fiancé or boyfriend, fellow crew member Bruno Souza Baicalho, reportedly saw or found her and informed ship authorities. The first explanation was suicide. Bruno reportedly told investigators that he found Camilla hanging by a bedsheet. Some secondary accounts describe the sheet as attached to a refrigeration or air conditioning pipe or tube inside the cabin. At first, that may sound like a complete explanation. A cabin. A bedsheet. A young woman found hanging. A tragic death just as the cruise was ending. But in an investigation, the first story is not enough. It has to match the physical scene. It has to match the medical findings. It has to match the statements of the people on board. And according to later reporting, Brazilian federal police did not believe this story fit. That is where the case begins to turn. The reported medical finding was mechanical asphyxia. But that phrase has to be handled carefully. Mechanical asphyxia does not automatically prove murder. It is a broad forensic category, meaning some outside physical mechanism restricted breathing or oxygen flow. It can include hanging, but it can also include other forms of compression or obstruction. So the important question was not simply whether Camilla died from asphyxia. The important question was whether the scene matched suicide by hanging. According to the case summary, investigators believed it did not. Reports said the claimed hanging scene was allegedly inconsistent with the forensic evidence. Bruno's version reportedly contained contradictions. His account also allegedly did not match other witness statements. That is the dark center of the cabin discovery. Not only that Camilla was dead, but that the explanation given for her death began to fall apart. A hanging scene depends on details. The height of the attachment point, the position of the body, the knot, the angle of the marks, the condition of the room, the time of death, whether the door was locked, whether anyone heard something, whether anyone entered or left the cabin, whether there were signs of struggle, whether the story matched the body. But the public record does not give all of that. The available file specifically warns that public sources do not confirm the exact cabin number, the deck, the body position, the sheet knot, whether the door was locked, or who removed the body. That means the scene cannot be recreated with fake certainty. We cannot say there was a fight. We cannot say Camilla screamed. We cannot say the cabin was locked from the inside. We cannot say the captain saw a specific thing. We cannot say CCTV captured a final movement. Those details may exist somewhere in original police or court documents, but they are not visible in the public material we have. And that actually makes the discovery more unsettling. Because the case is not built on a dramatic public crime scene. It is built on a private cabin and an official doubt. The ship was almost home. Passengers were preparing to leave. The cruise was ending. But behind the scenes, inside the crew quarters, a young woman's death had become something authorities could not accept as a simple suicide. MSC Cruises' reported initial response was neutral. The company expressed regret, offered condolences to the family, and said it would wait for the authorities' conclusions. And the authorities did not leave it as suicide. They treated Camilla's death as homicide. That is what makes the cabin discovery so important. It was the moment where a tragic explanation became a disputed one. A bedsheet became evidence. A cabin became a crime scene. And the hidden world of the MSC Musica became the center of a mystery that still does not have a clear public ending. The investigation into Camilla Peixoto Bandeira's death began with one question. Was this really suicide? At first, the story appeared simple. Camilla had been found dead inside a crew cabin aboard the MSC Musica. Her fiancé, Bruno Souza Baicalho, reportedly told authorities that he found her hanging from a bedsheet. The ship was returning to Santos after a 7-night cruise along the Brazilian coast, and what happened inside that cabin could have been treated as a private tragedy at sea. But Brazilian federal police did not accept the story that easily. According to later reporting, investigators believed the scene and statements did not match the hanging suicide explanation. The reported medical finding was mechanical asphyxia, but that term alone did not settle the case. Mechanical asphyxia is broad. It can involve hanging, but it can also involve other forms of external pressure that restrict breathing or oxygen flow. So investigators had to look at the whole picture. The cabin, the bedsheet, the attachment point, the condition of the body, the statements from people on board, the version Bruno gave, and whether all of those pieces fit together. According to the available summaries, they did not. Reports said the claimed hanging scene was allegedly inconsistent with forensic evidence. Bruno's version reportedly contained contradictions, and his account allegedly did not match other witness statements. That was the turning point. Camilla's death was no longer just an onboard suicide report. It became a homicide investigation. The person formally accused was Bruno Souza Baicalho, her fiancé or boyfriend and fellow crew member. But this is where the wording has to stay careful. Being accused is not the same as being convicted. A police investigation, a formal accusation, and a final guilty verdict are 3 different stages. In Bruno's case, the public record supports the investigation and formal accusation, but no verified conviction has been located. That makes the case legally sensitive. The script cannot say, Bruno killed her. It can only say that authorities pursued Camilla's death as a homicide and that Bruno was formally accused. The public record also does not give the full list of contradictions. It does not tell us exactly what the captain said, whether Bruno changed his timeline, whether cabin access records were checked, whether CCTV existed near the crew area, or whether there were injuries on Bruno. Those missing details matter. Because in a weaker documentary, this is where people would start inventing scenes. A loud argument, a struggle, a locked door, a witness hearing screams, a camera showing someone leaving the cabin. But unless the original police or court documents confirm those details, they should not be added. The strongest version of this story is also the most honest one. A young crew member was found dead. The first explanation was suicide. Federal police reportedly rejected that explanation. The death was pursued as homicide, and Bruno was formally accused. Then, in 2013, the case reached another disturbing stage. A regional G1 report said a Brazilian court issued a preventive arrest order for Bruno after he could not be located at 4 addresses provided to the court. The report also mentioned communication with Interpol, apparently because authorities were concerned about possible international flight. But even that does not close the case. A preventive arrest order is not a conviction. An Interpol communication is not the same as a confirmed active red notice. And being missing from certain addresses does not, by itself, tell us where Bruno went or what happened afterward. The final public trail remains unclear. No verified arrest. No verified trial. No verified acquittal. No verified conviction. Only an investigation that began inside a cruise ship cabin, rejected the first story, and then moved into a legal fog that still has not fully cleared. The aftermath of Camilla Peixoto Bandeira's death does not end with a clean courtroom scene. There is no widely available final judgment, no verified conviction, no verified acquittal, no clear public record showing exactly where the case finally landed. Instead, the story seems to move into something darker and more frustrating: legal limbo. After Camilla was found dead inside a crew cabin aboard the MSC Musica, Brazilian federal police reportedly rejected the first explanation of suicide. They believed the physical evidence and witness statements did not support the hanging story, and the case was pursued as a homicide. That changed everything. Because once investigators treated the death as homicide, the cabin was no longer just the place where a young woman had died. It became the center of a criminal case. The person formally accused was Bruno Souza Baicalho, Camilla's fiancé or boyfriend and fellow crew member. But this is where the language has to stay careful. A formal accusation is not the same thing as a conviction. It means prosecutors had enough to bring an allegation forward, not that a court had already proven guilt beyond doubt. And that distinction matters in this case more than most, because the public trail does not clearly show what happened next. The strongest later development appears in 2013. A regional G1 report said that a Brazilian court had issued a preventive arrest order for Bruno, described as a waiter accused of killing his fiancée. According to preserved summaries, he could not be found at 4 addresses given to the court, and there was also mention of communication with Interpol. That sounds dramatic, but it still does not close the story. A preventive arrest order is not a guilty verdict. An Interpol communication is not the same as a verified active red notice. And the fact that someone could not be located at certain addresses does not tell us exactly where they went, whether they were later found, or whether the case ever reached a final trial. That is the problem with Camilla's case. The beginning is visible. The middle is visible. But the ending disappears. The research file makes clear that no verified public record was found confirming Bruno's arrest, extradition, surrender, trial, conviction, acquittal, dismissal, death, or active Interpol notice. After 2013-0 from the outside, the case becomes a second mystery. The first mystery is what really happened inside Camilla's cabin. The second is what happened to the case after authorities ordered Bruno's preventive arrest. Maybe later developments exist in local court archives. Maybe the case was suspended. Maybe it continued without major public reporting. But without those documents, the final answer cannot be claimed. And that leaves Camilla's story in a deeply unsettling place. A young woman was found dead aboard a cruise ship. The suicide explanation was reportedly rejected. Her fiancé was formally accused. A preventive arrest order was reported. And then, the public record goes quiet. The ship returned to Santos. The passengers left. The crew moved on. But the case did not fully come back to shore. A cruise ship returned to Santos. Passengers packed their bags. Families walked off the vessel. The voyage ended. But inside the hidden crew world of the MSC Musica, one cabin had already become something the passengers would never see. A death scene. Camilla Peixoto Bandeira was only 28 years old. She was Brazilian, she worked aboard the ship, and she lived in the part of cruise life most guests never think about: the corridors, cabins, and private spaces behind the polished surface of the floating hotel. On January 10, 2010, she was found dead in her cabin as the ship returned from a 7-night voyage along the Brazilian coast. The first explanation was suicide by bedsheet hanging. But Brazilian federal police reportedly did not accept that story. According to later reporting, the scene and witness statements did not support the account, and Camilla's death was pursued as a homicide. Her fiancé, Bruno Souza Baicalho, was formally accused. Then, years later, a preventive arrest order was reportedly issued after authorities could not locate him at the addresses provided to the court. There was also mention of communication with Interpol. But after that, the public trail fades. No verified conviction. No verified acquittal. No clear final judgment. No complete public autopsy. No full courtroom ending. Just a cabin, a bedsheet, a rejected suicide story, and a young woman whose case seems to drift away from the public record. The MSC Musica kept sailing. Passengers kept boarding. The bright side of the ship stayed bright. But somewhere beneath it, in the crew quarters, Camilla's story remained in the dark. A death at sea, a case without a visible ending, and a mystery that never fully came back to shore.